I'm glad that you brought up resumes because I really want to talk about that. On that database, is it looking for keywords on that resume where it's like, I don't know, 5 years experience, they worked with this kind of livestock, or they've worked with this sort of technology that's listed on their resume? So is that database kind of pulling for those keywords a little bit?
It is. It
Okay.
actually will, when the person inputs it, they can select like their years of experience, their location, if they're willing to relocate, and various things like that. It will also search through for keywords too. So,
Okay.
like if you are very specific in that you want someone who's worked with beef cattle or a particular breed or worked with flying drones, I'm going all over the place here, but you can put in those specific keyword searches. You can also look if you want someone who has 10 years of experience, people can search by that as well.
Gotcha. And I know so in high school, we're always taught to make a resume like a certain way.
Mhm.
But I've seen so many people in different industries have different types of career, or different types of resumes. For example, a friend of mine, he works in Hollywood. He's trying to become a film director, and he's worked on all this stuff. And he showed me his resume one time. The resume is just the shows he's worked on and who he's worked with. Like, it's not about his experiences, his background, and all that stuff. He's like, "This is how our resumes look," and I'm like, that's wild, like wildly different from like my teaching and educational resume. Like, it's all about, what certificates we've gotten, what our teaching background is, and stuff like that. So how are our agriculture and food industry jobs, kind of, are those resumes going to be built a little bit differently than, I guess, like an educational resume?
I don't think so. What we've see, I would say the resumes in our industry are probably not very similar to what your friend had,
Hmm.
but very similar to what educators are teaching you, and probably general business structure, I would say. There's definitely some differences between student resumes versus experienced professionals. I like to see them in reverse chronological order. So what's happened most recent is at the top.
Mm.
We've kind of seen people step away from the old objective statement at the top and
Oh
go
yeah.
more
Hmm.
so with like a skill table or skills or
Ooh.
qualifications at the top. Yeah, and then really with resumes, it's not so much just listing responsibilities anymore. It's showing accomplishments. So
Gotcha.
what what you've accomplished, adding numbers, adding percent increases, figures, uh, active using active verbs
Hmm.
if you
Yep.
can.
Those are good. I've been finding these videos and clips on like Instagram, YouTube, and stuff like that, where people will give you resume tips, like what to include, what to do, all this. And somebody shared this hack, which is ingenious. It's like, if you have a gap in your work history and somebody asks you about it, just say, "I signed an NDA. I can't talk about it." And I was
Oh
like,
wow,
yeah, I'm like, that is
that's a
such
good
a great
one.
idea. Like, if you were, taking a vacation for a year or whatever, I mean, because sometimes they look down on it. It just kind of depends. But if you're just like, yeah, I signed an NDA, like, I thought that was such a good hack for anybody that, was working on a resume. I thought that was really
I
cool.
haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say with resumes, one thing is it's very subjective.
Mm,
it's a lot depends on the person reading it and what style they like. I think there's some very basic things that we could all agree upon. Um, you obviously want to have your make sure your contact information is on there.
yep.
Make sure it's a permanent email address. If you're a student, a lot of times students will have an email address associated with their educational institution, and making sure that's updated to a permanent email address. But another thing you can find too is that if you put your contact information only in the header,
Hmm.
sometimes when you're submitting those documents digitally, sometimes headers can be stripped out. So you might end up with a resume,
Okay.
but not your contact information. So, kind of paying attention to that when you're formatting things. Um, Another thing that it reminded me of something else was key when you were talking about keywords with a resume. Kind of it goes
Hmm.
both ways. So employers can search by those keywords, but for job seekers or anybody looking for a position, making sure you have the right keywords in your resume. And you want to try to relate them to the position as much as you can, but you also need to make sure that you actually have those qualifications. So
Yep. Yeah.
don't overstuff with, you see the word marketing or communications or public relations or something like that, and you're going to build it in every five sentences. But one thing that I think is particularly interesting, and this comes from a direction a few years back, was to take that whole job description, put it into a word cloud software,
Hmm.
which they're free online, and have that come back at you. And you could really see the words that are bigger and bolder are the words that are really important to that employer, and words that you should try to incorporate into your resume.
Oh, that's clever. Okay. So yeah, my wife Allie, she just had an internship. She works for the government, and her internship, she had to update her resume and everything. And we talked with somebody that works with USA Jobs, and that's like one of the biggest government job board websites. And they were saying that their database and it looks for the exact wordage that's listed on the job posting, and it tells you like we're interested in people with this background, and it's like the verbiage right after that statement is what it's looking for, but you
Mhm.
don't know that unless somebody like really tells you exactly that. So it's funny how all these different job boards are like pulling for all that data and how they try to find the best candidate. So I think that's really cool. And you mentioned something, making sure your email's up to date, but also do you think it's important to have a professional email, like not,
Yes,
like a personal weird email?
definitely a appropriate email address. You know, depending on if you're a fan of this or that,
Yep.
it could turn some employers off. So, you know, sticking to that basic of your name if you can. Now, I'm not a good example of that. My last name is Johnson, so it's kind of hard. You have to add in a few numbers and letters there usually to get a unique email address. But definitely having a unique email address that you will check, um, uh, that fits is recommended. Another thing I would say is with your social media. If
Mm,
you are, it's very common now for people to put their social media links on their resume, especially for like LinkedIn.
mhm.
LinkedIn's usually not a problem because that's more of a professional networking, so you're not going to be posting crazy things on there. But if you are sharing your social media, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, Instagram, making sure that they are either set to private if there's things on there you don't want people to see, or cleaning them up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a huge one that I felt like the last generation didn't have to worry about when it came to, like, even when I was applying for jobs, like, that was really, like, really unheard of, like, "Oh, we need to, like, update our Facebook and everything," but I feel like now it's becoming much more common, like, people think that, I don't know, their online life is private even though it's set to public, and your
Mhm.
employer is gonna look for that because they wanna see what your character is, what you've done, and all that stuff, so that's very, very important.
Right. And I think it kind of works both ways in that employers will look. Not everyone will,
Yeah.
but some will. But also, it gives a way for a job seeker or a candidate to get a peek into the employer as well, so they can check
Mhm.
out their social feeds, learn more about the company. You can tell a lot about an organization or a production company based on what people are sharing online. So it kind of works a little bit both ways.